Hey everybody, Jay Widener here, back to reading my book with the late great Vincent Bridges, Monument to the End of Time, and we're back to reading chapters. Sorry I was a little late on this one. It's harvest time. This chat is section 2 of chapter 6. And this one is called The World Tree and Astro-Alchemy. All right, here we go. Hit like and subscribe and all that jazz. As we saw in previous chapters, our earliest surviving alchemical text, the Egypto-Hebraic Isis the Prophetess, tells us that Isis received the secrets of alchemy from a composite being whose name is suggestive of the Kabbalistic tree of life. But what exactly is the tree of life? To the ancient Egyptians, it was the Djed pillar, the backbone of Osiris. The Djed began as a power object to the Neolithic cultures of the Nile Delta. It symbolized stability, or rather divine establishment. The world tree, or divine access, is a combined motif in the shamanic practices, indicating an awareness of the infrastructures of the universe. As this idea became a word, it was associated with the similar sounding words in order to give it a phonetic spelling. The root of these words from a complex that encompasses the concepts of speech, including divine speech, the culmination or zenith of a star, an olive tree, and the tree of life itself. This tells us that the ancient Egyptians thought of the Djed as something divinely pronounced, a word tree that links the earth and the stars. Interestingly enough, the Indo-European group of languages have a complex of root words that are similar to that which we have just outlined in the Egyptian. The world tree in this case is the oak, DRW, in ancient Indo-Aryan, just as the olive tree was the tree of life in the Mediterranean. Because of its ability to supply food and therefore ensure stability. It was the oak that provided stability for the ancient Proto-European wandering in the vast forests of the post-glacial warm spell. The word for oak also meant firm, strong, stable, and enduring. Our modern English words, truth, trust, and even tree come from these roots. Druid is also the DRW family and means seer of the oak. In Sanskrit, another Indo-European language, the word for tree is Daru, a derivation of DRW. In the Rig Veda, the ancient ceremonial hymns of the Indo-Aryan conquerors of India, we read that the tree is the material, quote, from which the gods have fashioned heaven and earth, the stationary, the undecaying, giving protection to the deities, unquote. The tree is the cosmic pillar around which the entire universe was thought to revolve. The world tree was often shown in Indian folk art as a great tree crowned with the pole star, which is called Dharuva, another derivative of DRW, which means the firm or fixed one. Rationally, this idea of the pole star as an external tree strikes us as kind of nonsense. Yet in the experiment conducted by Dr. Jonathan Shear of Maharashi University in the late 1970s, we find that the tree embodies a strange kind of truth. The experiment centered around a sutra in part 3 of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which states that, quote, by performing sanyama on the Dharuva, the pole star, one gains knowledge of the motion of the stars, unquote. Samyama is a deep state of rapport which allows for an actual transfer of energy or information with whatever one is focusing on, be it an image of a deity or a pole star. In his paper, published in January 1981 edition of the journal Metaphilosophy, Dr. Shear reports that he expected his subjects, all skilled meditators, to, quote, to perceive the motion of the stars in the context of the heaven as we are accustomed to perceive and think about them, unquote. However, this didn't happen. Instead of the usual sky wheel night sky familiar to us from Life magazine photo spreads, the meditators reported something very different. Quote, the pole star is seen as the end of a long rotating shaft of light. Rays of light come out from the shaft like the ribs of an umbrella. The umbrella-like structure on which the stars are embedded is seen as rotating. The whole experience is described as quite spectacular, blissful, colorful, and melodious, unquote. The meditators themselves were taken by surprise. They had no idea that this image of the world tree was an actual archetype until they stumbled across it. Dr. Shear is emphatic when he states that, quote, the experience is the innocent byproduct of the proper practice of the technique, unquote. Here is the archetypal Jed. The Rig Veda tells us that, quote, on top of the distant sky, there stands the word encompassing all, unquote. Stability, in the sense of the word Jed, means the link between Earth and the stars. We are stable only so long as we are connected to our stellar source. At the very least, Dr. Shear's experiment shows us that a spiritual rapport with the stars can produce information not available to the senses. The ancient seers used techniques like this in Dr. Shear's study to investigate the universe around them. The information they received from these practices became coded into the religious myths, symbols, and structures of the ancient world. The spiritual canon, or geometric organization, is the mathematical equivalent of the green language or of the Hermetic troubadours. Quote, let none ignorant of geometry enter here, unquote, hung over the door of Plato's Academy in Athens for good reason. The first formal explication of the canon since Vitruvius in ancient Rome was written by an almost unknown English scholar named William Stirling. Published anonymously in 1897, his book entitled The Canon, an exposition of the pagan mystery perpetrated in the Kabbalah as the rule of all art, managed, like Fulcanelli's Mystery of the Cathedrals, to become influential in spite of its obscurity. It inspired thinkers as diverse as the psychic archaeologist F. Bly Bond and the perennial Victorian bad boy magician Aleister Crowley, who liberally sprinkled his work with swipes from Stirling. According to Keith Critchlow, a geometric philosopher and student of Buckminster Fuller's, quote, the canon is based on the objective fact that events and physical changes, which are perpetual, are nevertheless completely governed by intrinsic proportions, periodicities, and measures, unquote. As Critchlow notes, quote, it is to such a hidden intrinsic language that the author of this book, Stirling, has dedicated himself, unquote. In his chapter on rhetoric, one of the liberal arts surrounding alchemy, on the base of Notre Dame's middle pillar, Stirling gives us a simple description of the great tree of life. The process of creation may be expressed by inscribing the Kabbalistic diagram in the upper hemisphere so that the apex or crown reaches to the Milky Way, while the 10th step will coincide with the earth, unquote. Stirling's Kabbalistic diagram is a 10-step pattern of unfoldment known to occultists as the tree of life, and according to his explication, is the basic pattern of the canon itself. Quote, the doctrine of the Kabbalah, and he spells Kabbalah with a C, it's very important, not K, was reduced to a geometric diagram in which 10 steps were grouped according to a progressive scheme so that the emanations of the spirit of the Elohim issues from the first step called the crown, and after passing through the whole figure is carried through the 9th step and finally reaches the 10th step or last of the series, unquote. This Kabbalistic diagram described by Stirling was first elucidated in the 2nd century Sefer Yetzirah. It pictures reality as the intersection of levels of abstraction. Stirling tells us that, quote, the ideas which the ancients connected and combined into this figure of 10 progressive steps appears to form the basis of all their philosophy, religion, and art. And in it, we have the nearest approach to a direct revelation of the traditional science or gnosis, which was never communicated except by myths and symbols, unquote. From this, we can see that the framework, the Gnostic pattern behind the universal language of symbolism, the imagery, the language of the birds, and the green language is this great world tree of geometry. Since Fulcanelli informs us that the argotique of the green language is based on a Kabbalistic pattern of meaning, it should be obvious that this pattern is the tree of life of his fellow Gnostic adepts. This is not that it is not obvious is the result of misdirection, conscious or unconscious, on the part of Fulcanelli's student, Eugene Canciollet. In the preface to the second edition of Mystery of the Cathedrals, Canciollet, while displaying his knowledge of the importance of stellar imagery in his master's work, seems compelled to end the preface with a major piece of misinformation. He states that the justification for the republication of the book lies in the fact that, quote, that this book has restored to light the phonetic Kabbalah, whose principles and applications have been completely lost, unquote. While this is somewhat true, Canciollet goes on to conclude that after his and Fulcanelli's work, quote, this mother tongue need never be confused with the Jewish Kabbalah, and that's with a K, unquote. He continues by asserting that the Jewish Kabbalah is full of transpositions, inversions, substitutions, and calculations as arbitrary as they are abstruse, unquote. Again, this is somewhat true for many explications of the Kabbalistic mystery, but it does not address the issue of the universality of the tree of life itself. Canciollet further muddies the water by suggesting that Kabbalahs, that's with the C, and Kabbalah with the K, are derived from different sources. Kabbalah with the C, he declares, is derived from the Latin Kabbalus, or horse, while the Kabbalah with the K is derived from the Hebrew word for tradition. On the surface, this is indeed correct, but Canciollet is skillfully avoiding the deeper meaning of both of these words, of which he must have been aware. Fulcanelli never voiced such opinions in the book, in the body of the book. On page 153 of Mystery of the Cathedrals, he obliquely refers to the Kabbalah with the C as the language of the gods and scorns the would-be, quote, would-be Kabbalists, whether they be Jewish or Christian, unquote, and, quote, the world-be experts whose illusory combinations lead to nothing concrete, unquote. He goes on to say, quote, let us leave these doctors of the Kabbalah to their ignorance, unquote, implying that those who claim to be doctors or academic authorities on the Hebrew Kabbalah. He says nothing against the Kabbalah with a K itself, but merely notes that it is misunderstood by almost everyone. By implication, Fulcanelli is also saying that he does understand it properly. Our earliest surviving alchemical text, Isis the Prophetess, points to a tree of life motif for its source of wisdom. Sterling, in his rediscovery of the ancient canon, concludes that the tree of life is the pattern which underlies the secret language of symbolism expressed by the liberal arts, which accompany alchemy philosophy on the base of the middle pillar on the porch of judgment. Fulcanelli himself points to the tree of life as the key secret in his description of the dragon's plinth, going so far as to quote the Sefer Yetzirah. Therefore, why should we, on the basis of Canciollet's prejudice, associate anything else with Fulcanelli's Kabbalistic image pattern? Fulcanelli, who instructs us that the language is a reflection of the universal idea, a clear reference to the world word tree, the Kabbalistic origins of the art of light. Fulcanelli reminds us, are but reflections of the divine light. Gothic art is magic art in that it uses the prototypical pattern of creation to create a reflection of that pattern here on earth. Fulcanelli is not only making use of the Kabbalistic tree of life pattern, he is a master of its symbolic subtleties. As he unfolds his array of images and concepts, we see the guiding matrix of the ancient word, the verbum dismissum, or lost word of Western esotericism, revealed to the divine world word tree that does indeed, as the Egyptians knew, connect us with the stability of the stars. All right. So there's like two forms of the Kabbalah, but they're based on the same pattern. And the Kabbalah with the K, which is the Hebrew Kabbalah, um, has another purpose than the Kabbalah with the C. Now, Cancele must have known about the Merkaba and knew that that was a chariot. And of course, chariots are driven by horses. So I'm not sure why he thinks that the Kabbalah with the K should be dismissed, but he apparently does. But I think that it's really combining the two, Kabbalah with the C and Kabbalah with the K, that you come to a fuller understanding, which is what I think Fulcanelli is telling us. I think Fulcanelli is telling us you got to take both of them, and you got to recognize the patterns that were within them. As for the verbum dismissum, in the possible third volume of Fulcanelli's trilogy, which would be Architecture of Nature, which I have back there and I've read, and it kind of feels like it was written by Fulcanelli. He actually gives you the verbum dismissum in the book. And I don't think I'm at liberty to put that out, so I'm not going to. Maybe I'll find some way to get it out to you without saying it, because I don't even want to say the word. And if you hear it, you'll probably laugh and think it's stupid because it's a word that you've heard before. I think that they made it stupid and dumb for the reason that they didn't want any gravity behind the verbum dismissum, because what the verbum dismissum does is you can cancel out like demons and the archons and negative energies, and just by saying the verbum dismissum. So it's all very interesting. Anyway, that's my chapter. I'll be back hopefully next week, and I'll be reading the next chapter. And thanks for watching. I'm Jay Widener. This is Reality Check. I've been reading from A Monument to the End of Time, Alchemy, Fulcanelli, and the Great Cross. And we're getting into some really serious stuff now. I think you're really going to like where we're going. Thank you very much for watching.